All right, well, welcome back to Commie Reading Group, comrades. Today we will be continuing Chapter 2 of Socialist Reconstruction. We left off on the form of socialist government. Although we know that the socialist government must be centralized rather than federated, we cannot and would not want to determine in advance its precise institutional structure. After all, the governmental structure of the United States evolved over 200 years. It has not been set in stone, but changed and amended over time, sometimes as a result of engaged popular struggle. New political forms will emerge in the struggle for socialism as people respond to expected and unexpected challenges. So we cannot establish the exact form that the new socialist government will take, but we can identify its core functions: securing basic political, social, and economic rights for all, managing the economy with an eye to mitigating the climate catastrophe, and guaranteeing the flourishing of people and the planet. These core functions can't be achieved through the form of governments we've inherited from capitalism. As our discussion of the problems of federalism demonstrates, we thus encounter the dilemma of needing a new form, but not being able to say exactly what it will be. The actual form the socialist government will take has to be determined through the application of revolutionary and democratic processes at the start of the socialist project. In full recognition of the fact that revolutionary struggle will itself produce new governmental forms, we offer here a sketch of what such a socialist form might include. We don't include all the familiar features of bourgeoisie conditions, such as the judiciary and presidency, which will be worked out at a constitute assembly, the body that will write the new constitution. We base the sketch on the functions and presumptions of socialist government. Ras- rational administrative units. The new socialist government will be more socially, demographically, and geographically representative of the population than the current one. More than 80% of the US population live in urban areas. But urban areas but but urban populations are widely underrepresented in federal and state bodies. Urban representation is undemocratically diminished in proportion to less populated rural and small town areas in the way the President, U.S. Senate, House of Representatives, and state legislatures are chosen. If citizens vote for the president, when citizens vote for the President of the United States, they are actually choosing electors who will cast votes in the Electoral College. The Electoral College significantly underrepresents the areas where the bulk of the population lives. It follows that we have to establish the Electoral College. We likewise have to abolish the Senate. 4 states, California, Texas, Florida, and New York, have a combined population of more than 110 million people. Together, they elect 8 members of the U.S. Senate. Another 4 states, Wyoming, Vermont, Alaska, and North Dakota, have the total population of 2.8 million people. Those four states also have a total of 8 seats in the US Senate. That is obviously not equal representation. Basic democracy entitles that the form of socialist government is not compatible with the continued existence of the Senate. Neither is social government compatible with the in, inadequate divisions of states, counties, and municipals. I don't know what that word is, I'm sorry. Large urban areas have vastly different needs than smaller cities and towns. New York State has a population of 19.5 million people. Nearly half of the million, nearly half of them, 8.5 million, live in New York City. The issues facing New York City residents differ significantly from those in western or upstate New York. But the votes of New York City's representatives in the state assembly are essentially canceled out by the votes of those who come from smaller areas with their own distinct issues and needs. The current federalist form of government that was created more than 2 centuries ago, when the majority of the population earned its income from agriculture. It's clearly unsuited to be a democratic form. Why should New York or any state be a distinct unit of governance? Greg, how you doing, comrade? Great to see you. The new socialist government will reflect modern realities. More and more people are moving into urban areas, but the inadequate form of government disempowers them relative to the much smaller non-urban population. Instead of fragmented into separate states, New York City, Newark, Jersey City, and parts of Connecticut, with a combined population of 20 million people, may be grouped into an administrative unit equivalent to what is now a state. Smaller reorganizations throughout the country will lay the administrative groundwork for a rational and representative socialist government. Local government jurisdictions that unnecessarily divide large, contiguous, urban metropolitan regions with artificial and outdated city limits will also be replaced. Again, New York City and parts of New Jersey and Connecticut are a good example insofar as they clearly constitute a recognized urban regional area. In the interest of furthering democracy and facilitating planning, Socialist Reconstruction will institute more rational administrative units. Oh, welcome in, Takumi. We're reading Socialist Reconstruction. It's a great book. National Representative Assemblies. Socialist government has to ensure that decisions impacting the entire country are taken and overseen by bodies with representation from the entire country. To this end, we envision a central socialist government that, like the current US government, also has two chambers. Unlike the current government, the socialist one will be designed to be truly representative. The first chamber will be the National People's Assembly. Conforming loosely to the current House of Representatives, The National People's Assembly will consist of delegates elected from local election districts and from mass organizations representing various sectors in society: labor unions, women's organizations, youth, etc. It will need to be numerically much larger than the current 435 member House of Representatives in order to guarantee adequate representation from all urban regions, smaller towns, and rural areas. Currently, there is about one representative in Congress for every 750,000 citizens in 70, 750 million citizens in the country. This is an absurd small number for a democracy. For instance, in Cuba, there is one member of parliament for every 20,000 citizens. In addition to expanding the number of representatives, Socialist Reconstruction will establish guidelines guarantee the working class character of the National People's Assembly, and requiring women make up at least half of the elected delegates. The redrawn and administrative units discussed in the preceding sections will ensure that the National People's Assembly is representative of the multinational working class. No longer will the 83% of the country who live in urban areas be dominated by the interests of those living in low populated, primarily white districts. None of the delegates will be full-time politicians. The second chamber will be the Assembly of Oppressed Nations. The Assembly of Oppressed Nations will replace the U.S. Senate, the U.S. Version of Britain's House of Lords. For the last 440 years, the U.S. capitalist class has secured its wealth and domination over society by the theft of the lands of the indigenous people and nations of North America, and by the enslavement and subsequent and super oppression and exploitation of African Americans. Institutions of racism were constructed to enforce the system and ensure the ongoing disenfranchisement, franchisement, and marginalization of tens of millions of people. Oh, welcome in, Seth. Good evening. To correct this historic injustice and to guarantee the full unity of the working class on the basis of genuine equality, the Assembly of Oppressed Nations will function as a second chamber. It will consist of delegates from oppressed nations and peoples. It will consist of to become law, promised legislation will need to secure a majority vote in both the National People's Assembly and Assembly of Oppressed Nations. Regional and local affairs will be managed by either a regional people's assembly for larger urbanization regions or a local people's assembly for smaller cities, towns, and rural areas. Unlike the undemocratic and ineffective federal system, in centralized socialist systems, laws will be universally applied throughout the country. Collective executive power. Currently, the U.S. Congress has the ability to pass laws, levy, and raise taxes. approve a federal budget, declare war, approve judicial nominees for the federal courts, and impeach the president and federal judges. Before, before it becomes law, every resolution requires a passage in both the Senate and the House of Representatives, and then must be signed by the president. In addition to serving as head of state and commander-in-chief of the armed forces, the president is responsible for imp- implementing the laws written by Congress and appointing the heads of the 15 different federal agencies that executive government policies in different areas. That execute government policies in different areas, sorry. As capitalism has transformed into monopoly capitalism, over the past century, the executive branch has acquired substantially more power at the expense of the legislative branch. This growing centralized power in the executive branch corresponds to the centralism in the economy whereby a handful of megacorporations and banks exert overwhelming control. In fact, the most important agencies in the executive branch are organized to serve the interest of capitalist-owned corporations. The Departments of Treasury and Commerce serve the banks and biggest corporations. The Department of Agriculture is the servant of the enormous conglomerates of agribusinesses. The Department of Defense is basically a mechanism for handing $750 billion every year to the capitalist weapons manufacturers. The socialist government will break the capitalist class's hold on government by nationalizing the corporations. Government will exist not to enrich the few, but to serve the people, to meet the needs of the working class, and to protect the environment and migrate the damage to the planet. The planet. I'm just gonna say destroyed by climate change. The new constitution will identify the socialist government's legally binding obligations to society and to every individual. To maintain an environmentally sustainable economic system that ends reliance on fossil fuels, to abolish economic exploitation and wage slavery, and to guarantee free or affordable housing, healthcare, lifetime education, childcare, access to participatory par, participar, participatory sports and other physical activities, regular and free access to cultural and art activities, to professional civil servants. Tens of millions of volunteers will be mobilized to interfere directly into the affairs of society. Specific examples help depict what this collective arrangement of executive power will look like. Consider banking, explored in more detail in Chapter 4. The new socialist government will take possession of all the existing capitalist banks and create one people's development one people's development bank. Sorry, I'll answer your question once I'm done with this part. The People's Development Bank will exist as a public ULT charged with assessing and administering the financial resources necessary for national level projects. One of its immediate tasks will be directing credit and investment as part of a nationwide economic plan for socialist reconstruction on the basis of ending the use of fossil fuels and transcending to renewable energy. Another example is the Central Economic Agency. The Central Economic Agency is the administrative body that will exercise oversight over all the newly nationalized, formerly capitalist, core enterprises from the purpose of economic planning. It will establish an executive authority that is responsible for establishing 5-year, 10-year, and 20-year national economic plans designed to meet the needs of society when ending the use of fossil fuels. A third example is the People's Health Administration, described in Chapter 7. The People's Health Administration will operate all hospitals, medical facilities, pharmaceutical companies, and medical equipment manufacturers in accordance with the constitutional requirement of providing free healthcare for everyone. Private healthcare insurance companies will be dissolved. Similar central agencies will be responsible for housing, transportation, agriculture, education, culture, international affairs, and public safety. What is crucial is that a mass organization that enlists large numbers of citizenry on a volunteer basis will accompany every major federal, regional, and local agency, as subsequent chapters make it clear. The mass organizations will have legal status for input, decision making, and implementation of government policy. The mass organizations, and also, let's see, welcome in Hitchman. Hitch, I'm going to call you Hitch. Welcome in, Hitch. The mass organizations are the most vital element of socialist governments. In a sense, the executive power of socialist society is in the people's hands. We carry out the decisions that we make. Without organization, the power of the people is lost. Real democracy requires full participation in making and implanting the decisions that affect everyone's lives. Over 140 million people go to work every day in the US. For a big part of the working class, about half our waking hours are spent on the job during 5 or 6 or even 7 days. But in today's capitalist society, almost all decisions in the workplace are made by employers and the managers they hire. Even though unions have no say in what is produced and how it's distributed, they at least give employees a seat at the table when it comes to decisions about wages, benefits, and working conditions. But in today's capitalist society, almost all decisions in the workplace are made by employers and the managers they hire. Even though unions have no say in what is produced and how it's distributed, they at least give employers a seat at the table when it comes to decisions about wages, benefits, and working conditions. but only 6% of workers are organized in labor unions. It used to be higher, but the anti-union offense of the capitalists since the 1970s have reduced the percent of the unionized workplaces. Thus, most workplaces operate as a dictatorship of the employers. Whether someone is even able to keep their jobs is a decision left to the employer. The Constitution forming the new socialist government will include a provision that every workplace be unionized so workers have a direct say in how work is organized, and to provide protection for the workers' rights in the event of mismanagement or abuse on the job. Core decisions regarding how work is organized can only be taken after consultation and consent from the union. Unions will be mass organized, representing and including workers from every workplace in the country. This will enable them to serve as powerful forces for grassroots organizing. All the major enterprises will be publicly owned. They will be they will belong to the people, to the working class. The government will hold title to the enterprise, but the employees will be directly involved in all the relevant decisions. Our direct involvement will help guarantee that labor is organized to fulfill the needs and socialist obligations of government as outlined by the Constitution. Additionally, the inclusion of workers in the working place in workplace management will increase the capacity of government agencies to meet the challenges that arise at local, regional, and national levels. We have focused on unions, but mass organizations of any sort that contribute to the development of socialist consciousness, environmental, and collective well being will be encouraged. Sports and cultural clubs, women's, LGBTQ, and youth groups, historical societies, and neighborhood and environmental associations are just a few of the various kinds of mass organizations that will be provided material, material support. The central role of mass organizations. The socialist reconstruction of society will require the mobilization of the great masses of people. While the exact form of socialist government cannot be determined prior to a constitutional convention, we know for certain that it must be anchored in an immense expansion of democracy and participation. This is especially true given the existential crisis of climate change. Mass organizations of the people, especially at the local level, will be key to meeting the needs of people and the planet in the face of extreme weather events, global health emergencies, and similar such disasters. Hey, Skin, could you do me a favor? We'll have like a discussion part after I'm done reading. Could you hold your comments till then? You're kind of impeding the stream here. Because like you're just flooding with the comments, and I understand you got a lot to say, and I can I'm happy to answer your questions. I just I gotta continue reading. I can't keep on looking at this chat. No currently existing government is the model for the best way of involving masses of people and improving in problem solving. Nevertheless, there are lessons from those that exist now. One of the most important is how China managed the COVID 19 pandemic. The Chinese success with the coronavirus pandemic was not the government's alone. The voluntary mass organizations of the people were essential. China, with a population 4 times the size of the United States, had fewer than 5,000 COVID 19 deaths at the time of this writing. In contrast, the death toll is in the US was over 800,000 as of January 2022. China is still a poor country compared to the United States. Why did China's system of government succeed while the US failed so miserably? The answer is that in China, the central government called on governmental institutions and civil society to wage war against the coronavirus. Not only government institutions like the health ministry, but all the civil society, including organizations of young people, business groups, and others swung into action. Because the mass organization model is unfamiliar to people in the United States, and because China has been so demonetized in the US media, many think a positive description of anything coming from China should be dismissed as pro-China propaganda. This is actually a great segment for you right now, Skin. This is important context for reading the U.S. the Washington D.C. based Brookings Institution's description of how the Chinese people managed COVID-19. One of the first item of order with mobilizing teams of medical personnel, including doctors, nurses, and community leaders, who became frontline of foot soldiers. The first batch of emergency medical teams arrived in the embattled city, Wuhan, just one day after the lockdown started on January 24th. Also that day, the National Health Commission dispatched teams from multiple hospitals in Guangdong. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that city right. My apologies. Which which each had temporary branches of the Communist Party embedded in them. Shortly afterwards, the Communist Youth League of Wuhan issued a public notice online and recruited over 7,000 volunteers in less than 12 hours. Donning reed vests and matching armbands, volunteers got to work in neighborhoods and communities, delivering groceries and essential supplies. These volunteers often worked in concert with the state-led neighborhood communities and community grid management teams to knock on residents' doors, checking each person's temperature, registering returnees from Hubei province, and handing out educational pamphlets. These were the most visible of volunteers at the grassroots level. What is the context of this reading? Just information. I'm not exactly sure what you're trying to ask, but this book is called Socialist Reconstruction. It's the Party for Socialism's vision for a socialist future, pretty much, like how we will construct a socialist future, pretty much, like what a socialist future will look like after the revolution, pretty much, in in America. But like it, I doubt we're gonna call it America. Who knows? Like there's those simple questions like that's like kind of like whatever, like what is it called, you know? Wuhan, a city of 12 million people, was locked down on January 23rd, 2020. No one lost their job. No one was evicted from their home. Government institutions and mass organizations of the people provided the necessary logistical support. Everyone who was quarantined received food deliveries to their homes from volunteers from the mass organizations. Healthcare professionals and volunteers went to the home of every family to check on them. This system succeeded. On April 8th, 2020, the Wuhan lockdown was lifted. The Associated Press reported residents celebrate their freedom after 76 days with riverside parties while the city puts on a sound and light show emphasizing its resilience and the courage and sacrifice of first responders. Of course, the new socialist form of government in the United States will be based on what is needed in this country and how we choose to relate to the rest of humanity. The US differs from other countries in many ways, but we can learn from others as well as from the study of our own conditions and circumstances. China is still a poor country. It is much poorer than the US, although it is a rapidly developing country. China has many deficits, as well as positive attributes. The point is not to make China or any country the model for the US or the rest of the world, but we, the people in the US, need to learn from the experiences of other countries. Healthcare is free in many parts of the world. Childcare is free or affordable in other advanced industrial economies. Vaccinations elsewhere are much longer than they are here. Women have full access to abortion rights in a number of other countries. Education at the universal level is free in a number of countries. Many of these important advances have even taken place in countries that still have capitalist dominated economies and governments. The new socialist government needs to be based on the accumulated experiences from inside and outside the United States. We can't predict and won't prescribe every aspect of the new form of socialist government, but we premise our proposal on a vision of a new, more inclusive democracy that vastly expands the interrogation of millions of people into the day-to-day management of the affairs of the society. This is the key. The new socialist construction will legally empower many mass organizations of the people. This is essential to democracy and effective governments. Instead of acting as spectators while a handful of career politicians, professional administrators, and governmental staffs and specialties make all decisions, a socialist government will draw in millions of citizens to initiate, manage and maintain all the myriad affairs of state and society,